Welcome to Will to Speed, where we move fast and break things. That's a meta joke. But we are going to be discussing more philosophy, trying not to crash out or spin out, and pick up where we left off in last episode. We were yapping about early Greeks. We did some housekeeping. So there'll be more of that. We're picking right back up in early Greek territory. So let's see. It's worth saying up front that this is a personal interpretation of the history of philosophy. I'm not trying to give you a textbook version, but more what I consider to be load-bearing and interesting. There's others who have done the same. One of my favorite books is Sophie's Choice. I forget the author's name right now, of course, but I'll put it somewhere here. Or in something, I'll put it somewhere. But Sophie's Choice is a good book I've read multiple times. Of course, you got the GOAT, Bertrand Russell, also Will Durant. All these people told it how they want to, and I'm going to do the same. As for my beliefs, I don't have beliefs as much as I have ideas that I keep around until I need to update them or discard them. Also, as far as dates are concerned, I'm not that interested in the dates. I understand the chronology, but the dates aren't any more important to me than the actual doctrine, you know? And I barely give a damn about the doctrine. This is just, you know, exploratory, whatever. I think I'm supposed to go, yep. So yeah, and since you've made it this far, I'm assuming you understand that we count toward this year zero, thanks to some Christian bookkeeping from Rome. It is a weird lens to be looking at pre-Christian pagans through, but here we are, you know? So before we get to Pythagoras, I do want to discuss how long and how much of an influence religion actually had on philosophy. We're not going to get into the weeds about Egypt, you know, the Babylonians, Mycenaeans, you know what I mean? Phoenicians. We're not getting into that much right now, but I do want to touch on Hellenism, which before the development of the Greek written language was more of an orally transmitted tradition. And these were poems from Bronze Age, earlier times, and while that ink was drying, you had the slave class. They were cooking up their own mystery spin-offs. One of those mystery cults, which itself is something of a denomination, something of a denomination of an earlier mystery cult, is the cult of Orpheus. From what we understand, these Orphic cults, like their predecessors, they were tribal, and they included induced altered mental states. So we mentioned the last time about this sublimation or gradual changing, I got it, of traditions or cultures, and that remains the same for these mystery cults. In fact, it kind of started as something widely accepted, more or less, transitioned into something that was more a necessary evil, like a purging, only for certain special occasions. I need this light, all right, yo, because for certain special occasions. And then it progressed to being something that was frowned upon, something looked at as barbaric. And these blood libations and ecstatic states were viewed as detrimental to society, and membership wasn't something worth bragging about. So that's like that progression of the acceptance culturally. And also, I wish I had like a obnoxious graphic to show, because this is what we will see moving forward, this dialectic of multiple reactions, basically, this chaos, order, and reaction, especially in a population. This is a great example of that. So Then you have, I think it's worth mentioning that, you know, more than a few written languages start as religious texts or translations. So it's kind of safe to say that writing and scripture both arrive together more often than not. I'm going to take this one. I'm looking for that bridge. The bridge or the ports with the containers. That's my spot. So yeah, separately, aside from the right-wing Hellenism, you had lagging behind that pagan mystic tradition, and which were mostly oral, and that gave them this special malleability versus anything that was written down, and left them more open to individual rendition and reinterpretation. And these were, like I mentioned, farming people, and their relationship to the land gave them a particular filter, perhaps more practical, seasonal, tied to what the earth was actually doing. So anyways, the person steeped in that culture, that chaotic culture, is Pythagoras, and I love it. We have to mention him now because he has so much influence downstream. And he had something like a Rain Man level precision that he applied to this mystic culture, and it reverberates throughout. He was closely tied to this Orphic rule tradition, and this Orphic tradition is typically viewed as a kind of denomination of the earlier Dionysian mystery cults. That connection matters more than it seems, because this is where we get Greek tragedy from. The theater of this period kind of grows from that Dionysian ritual and the song performed in honor of Dionysus, excuse me. So when we say Pythagoras is soaked in this Orphic Dionysian tradition, we're not saying he's adjacent to the roots. It's more like he kind of is the roots, you know? I probably would have been sold on whatever he was selling back then. Honestly, if you put me back then, I would have probably been all ears at least. He's famous for saying everything is number, and we still use the harmonic ratios that he discovered in music. Most of what he gives us, or what we have of him, comes to us by way of Plato or his other disciples. And this guy, to put it mildly, he was idiosyncratic, okay? He reportedly found beans appalling. He banned his followers from eating beans. He hated irrational numbers. Apparently, numbers that couldn't be expressed as a clean ratio offended something in his worldview. A lot of this folklore kind of comes from like that kind of like a repackaged farm superstition, you know, like don't poke a fire with a knife, don't jump over a broom. These things kind of sound silly, but they are basically pagan folklore, you know, and they trace all the way back to that same rural mystic culture that he came out of. In every sense, he was a special guy, you know. It's easy to imagine his influence rippling out from anybody who heard him speak. Visible again in the theater of that time. It's also understood that many of the pre-Socratics that we mentioned in the last episode were members of these mystery cults themselves, even holding a certain cultural reverence for the traditional gods, even when this is a nice neighborhood. Yeah. Never seen this part of town. Even when their own philosophies kind of like differed, and when it was pulling in a different direction. So like we mentioned, that sublimation or that gradual motion from the tradition and customs and ritual that didn't just vanish the moment a new framework shows up. It's especially true in the rural often slave worked areas where the oldest ways had the deepest roots. Is this, oh my God, wrong way. All right. We haven't had to reset the car yet, so that's a bonus. I am going in circles. I'm looking for the bridge. Anyways, I think this brings us naturally, blinker, my boy. This brings us naturally to the Odyssey, which is, poems I'm familiar with a little bit. I've listened to in pieces. I'm familiar with the Nolan movie. I haven't gotten to that yet. The point isn't the plot. It's more of the point. You know, most thinkers of that time probably did see the artistic license of Homer for what it was. Go. Most people probably, though, like the layperson, probably simply accepted the story of Troy the way Homer put it. And this was kind of like a one-directional, top-down belief where you receive the truth and you don't argue with it. And this one-directional model is exactly what we start to see break down with the rise of democracy in Athens, okay? This is about the 5th century. Suddenly being good at verbal debate and discussion has practical value. Courts and voting assemblies, they turn public speaking into, you know, a hot commodity. It's good to have it. It's good to do it. It's good to be good at it. Tragic theater kind of belongs in this same picture, and it's worth tying back to where we're kind of coming from here, because these plays and performances were staged at these religious festivals honoring Dionysus, which means that same Orphic tradition that's running through Pythagoras is also, you know, showing on the Athenian stage. And yeah, kind of tragedy becomes that place where mythos and logos argue it out in public in front of the whole city, you know, at a religious festival that's built around this god of ecstatic ritual. Yeah, and it's basically mythos and logos sharing a stage, literally. Which brings us to the Sophists, because out of that same environment, come on, did I get a green? Out of that same environment, we get that, we get the Sophists, because there's, you know, it was cosmopolitan, rhetoric, argumentative, you know, commingling of people and trades and ideas. That's my go. Audio's funky. It's unfortunate. Anyways, Plato has a lot to say about these Sophists, but his commentary aside, there was obviously a market for this type of skills. Protagoras is one of the popular Sophists. He gives us, why did the audio suck? I don't like this. Anyways, Protagoras is one of the popular Sophists. He gives us the quote that basically encapsulates the whole movement of the time, and it is man is the measure of all things. And that basically means everything is relative to the person doing the measuring. And this kind of ties back to Pythagoras, because he was spending his life kind of recoiling from this irrational, incommensurable numbers. And the Sophists take this opposite view. And they say where anything can't be measured by a fixed point, then the only true measure is the measurer. That's like, you know, relativism. So you have Pythagorean uncertainty and the Sophist relativism, both on two separate sides of the spectrum. And that can lead you to a certain, is this a border? I've never seen this. That can lead you to a certain type of aporia. And that's basically the that tension we're going to be talking about next time when we get into Socrates and Plato. We'll get into the details about who was real and who was writing for who, right? We'll talk about that. And what else? I think the next videos might just be, I might just go back and forth from different topics now that we have most of the pre-Socratics out the way. We should have a recap, right? So if the recap is the, where did we start? We started with Greeks, early Greeks, mystic traditions, Hellenism being a written oral history. Oral history and the sublimation, of course, of traditions and rituals. We talked about Greek tragedy having roots in these mystic traditions, about the Athenian stage being the sort of the battlefield of sorts for mythos and logos. Pythagoras, of course, we mentioned his idiosyncrasies and how cracked he was. Obviously, he hated irrational numbers and beans. We still use his harmonic ratios. And the sophist, which came out of, the sophist, which came out of the argumentative, artistic, basically, mixture and culture that was happening at the time. Protagoras being a sophist, saying that man is the measure. And yeah, I think that's basically it. This is not a deep dive. I'm kind of just really just getting comfortable with this whole process and discussing what I like to discuss. This is basically just me killing two stone birds, man. Like, I'm just trying to not feel bad. And we crash. I think that's a good place to end. All right, till next time.